Legend of Total War here, and today we're doing a bottom 5 Total War video. This time covering the bottom 5 legendary lords in Total War Warhammer 2, specifically for campaign. So these are the legendary lords that are, in terms of the campaign, just not really up to scratch with the other legendary lords. They either don't provide much of a campaign bonus for their faction, they're maybe not particularly good in battle, or maybe they enhance units that you really wouldn't be using that much of in a particular campaign. So these are legendary lords that just really aren't as good as all the other ones. So with that being said, let's jump in now to the number 5 slot. Coming in at number 5 is Volkmar the Grim for the Empire. Not a terrible lord on his own, but the problem here with him is that comparing him to all other legendary lords, he really does fall short. Now, he's very good at one thing in particular, and that's buffing Flagellants. There's probably no legendary lord in the game that buffs a unit quite as much as Volkmar the Grim buffs Flagellants. But the problem with that is that Flagellants are an early game unit, and you're probably not going to be wanting them, even with the buffs, come the late campaign. So all of his buffs that he provides to Flagellants, come the late campaign, it'll all be for nothing. Now, looking at his skills, the biggest problem with him is that he just lacks potential. He's good in the early campaign, but that's about it. So he's good if you want to have a really short campaign and you're not interested in fighting chaos or conquering the map. He's got 2 really good items here, so that's something that's going for him. The Staff of Command especially, +3 Public Order All Provinces. Now if you're playing on Legendary difficulty, +3 Public Order All Provinces is really good, and there's not that many Legendary Lords that do provide such a big bonus. But you're playing as the Empire in here, and the Empire doesn't really struggle with public order, so you have other means with which to get that public order. Karl Franz has got Galmaraz. There's a bonus building in Altdorf. There's technologies you can utilize. If the Empire really struggled with public order, then Volkmar the Grim probably wouldn't have made the list, but they don't really, and so this item here just is a little bit redundant. The Jade Griffin, that's a good one as well. Provides him with a lot of ward save and provides him with hit point replenishment. But the problem with that is that Volkmar the Grim is not very good melee combatant. The only lord that would probably struggle against Volkmar the Grim within the Empire is Balthazar Gelt, and that's assuming Balthazar Gelt doesn't use any magic on him. So in terms of his melee capability, he's really down below. Even regular lords on both level 1 comparisons and when maxed out are able to easily beat Volkmar the Grim in a duel. Now Volkmar does provide some decent bonuses to units that are around him, but again, if all of those units around him are just Flagellants, it just doesn't cut it. And that's about the extent to which he's unique, and he just falls short compared to other legendary lords, and that's why he gets the number 5 spot. So that being said, let's move on now to number 4. Coming in at number 4 is Malagor the Dark Omen for the Beastmen. Now, Malagor's a bit of a different legendary lord in that depending on the difficulty rating that you're playing on will affect how useful he is. The lower the difficulty, the more useful he is. But in my opinion, having a legendary lord be more useful on the higher difficulties would provide more value. Now, the main reason why I say that is because one of the biggest things that he does is reduce enemy leadership in the area. So he's got this skill here that reduces enemy leadership by -9, and his battle effect is by -8. So that's a total of -17. Now, that's a lot of leadership that he drops the enemy by just by his sheer presence. Now, that's good for breaking really terrible units. But come late campaign, when you're going up against Black Orcs and Chosen Warriors, that -17, especially on the higher difficulty ratings, isn't really going to count for much, and those units are still pretty much going to fight to the death. And as it was the case with Volkmar the Grim, Malagor just is not particularly useful come the late campaign, and that's where these legendary lords really set apart from the other ones, which become super powerful come the late campaign. Now, another thing with Malagor is that there's just not much uniqueness to him. He is a caster, but you know, you can get these spells through agents through the Beastmen, and this particular law of magic that he's got, the Law of the Wild, is, in my opinion, one of the weakest laws of magic that this game has to offer. It used to be really good when it first came out, but it got nerfed into the ground. It's very expensive in terms of the magic cost and doesn't really do a whole lot. There are far better laws of magic to use than Law of the Wild. Again, this is another thing that sets Malagor apart from other legendary lords. He's terrible in melee. Now, not all casters are supposed to be used in melee, so it's not really losing too many points off that, but there are also a lot of legendary lords that are very good casters, better casters than him, and are also decent in melee. So, you don't have a very good caster who's not good in melee. He's only really good at making the enemy scared, and if that doesn't work, if it doesn't break the enemy unit, it doesn't matter if the enemy unit has 1 morale or 100. If you don't break it, then this doesn't mean anything. Now, the item here that he has, it's okay, but it's the only item he's got. So it's really not very good. So overall, he's just not really a very versatile legendary lord. There are regular lords that are better than Malagor the Dark Omen come the late campaign, and that's why he gets the number 4 slot. Alright, now let's move on to number 3. Coming in at number 3 is Sigvald the Magnificent. Now, Sigvald's biggest problem is that he's a selfish prick. He's an excellent melee fighter, one of the best in the game in terms of dueling. He's not the best, but he is quite good. Now, his biggest problem is the fact that he doesn't really contribute to his faction at all, where most other legendary lords do provide even a small bonus to their faction. Now, Sigvald does the opposite and provides bonuses to his own army at the cost of the faction. Now, it's not a huge penalty, but increasing the upkeep cost for all Chaos Lords and Chaos Sorcerer Lords is a bit of a problem, especially considering that the Warriors of Chaos do have economic problems. If you're not constantly raising settlements to the ground, you might find that this little bit of increase in upkeep cost might give you problems. And come the late campaign, when you've got more and more armies, this is going to become more and more useless to you, especially considering it's only improving his own army. Except for this ability here, but hero action success chance plus 9% and reduced cost is not worth the penalty that this one provides. So his biggest problem is that he's just a selfish prick. He's a strong melee lord, but that's about it. As far as comparing him to other legendary lords, he really does rank pretty damn low in my opinion, and that's why he got the number 3 spot. So let's now move on to number 2. Coming in at number 2 is one that I think people are probably going to disagree with, but I'm going to explain myself as best I can. It's Ungrim Iron Fist for the dwarfs for Karak Kadrin. Now, there's a number of reasons why I think that Ungrim Iron Fist is a bottom 5 legendary lord. Now, he's part of arguably one of the strongest factions in the game, and there are 4 legendary lords in this faction. So himself, Thorgrim Grudgebearer, Belegar Ironhammer, and Grombrindle, the White Dwarf. Now the thing is, Ungrim Iron Fist doesn't provide any global bonuses at all to his faction. He really is focused on his own army, and is mainly focused on Slayers. Now that being said, he is the Slayer King, that is what he should be doing. But all of the other legendary lords provide bonuses to the entire faction. Whether it's Thorgrim and Belegar providing public order bonuses, or Grombrindle providing campaign movement range to all armies and extra replenishment, even if it's only a small amount, all of that is far more valuable than just having a legendary lord that is excellent in a duel. And he is. He's one of the best legendary lords if you're looking for a duel. But come the late campaign, you're going to be up against lots of armies, and he can't take on an entire army by himself, and Slayers, come the late campaign, do tend to just die very easily. They're not bad units, but they're a bit of a glass cannon. So I usually, when I'm playing the dwarves, don't actually even hire any Slayers come my late game armies. They're just lower tier than, for example, Iron Breakers and Organ Guns. So Ungrim Iron Fist just doesn't really have the potential come that. Now, he does have 3 items, and so that is working in his favor, and probably stopping him from getting the number 1 slot. But they don't really provide anything apart from just making his own army better, whereas other Legendary Lords get items that provide global bonuses to some degree. So that's the main reason why he's getting the number 2 slot. He is a very strong Legendary Lord. All Legendary Lords have their strengths and weaknesses, but in my opinion, Ungrim Iron Fist just doesn't really provide a whole lot of value to the Dwarfs compared to other Legendary Lords. Anyway, let's now move on to the number 1 slot for the most useless Legendary Lord in the game. Coming in at number 1, and I don't think many people are going to be too surprised about this one, is Alberic de Bordelot. Now, the thing about Alberic is that he's just really underwhelming. There's not really a whole lot of difference between him and just a generic Bretonnian Lord. Now, he's the weakest Legendary Lord as part of one of the weakest factions in this game. Now, that might not always be the case. Bretonnia is going to get an update fairly soon, but we don't know if it's actually going to make Bretonnia any better. And we don't know if Alberic is going to get any better either. So, in a faction that really does need its Legendary Lords to step up their game, Alberic just doesn't do that. So, he's great if you want to fight lots of battles out at sea. Well, let me just reiterate that. He's okay if you want to use him out at sea. He's not the best. You know, Lockyer Felhart is, and to be honest, he nearly made the list as it is. But looking at Alberic's skill tree, he's got a lot of stuff in here. A lot of stuff that every other generic Bretonnian Lord has. It's only a few things that he's got going for him. So he's got his item here, the Trident of Man. And to be honest, you can get blue items that's better than this. It's one of the worst, in my opinion, just one of the worst legendary items in the game. And he only gets 1. Doesn't provide any global bonuses. And it just isn't really that good. One thing that is decent with him, it's probably the only thing that's decent that he provides for the faction, is Appoint Reeves, improving one of the commandments by a significant amount, the Peasant Duty. That's actually a pretty good bonus that he does provide. And then to a minor extent, there's Yield of Sea, which increases trade and income from ports by 10%, which is alright. But for a Legendary Lord, as I said, he's just the least legendary out of all the Legendary Lords. Not a bad guy to have, but just not particularly special or overwhelming at all, considering how awesome some of the other Legendary Lords can be. Even some of the Legendary Lords that are on this list, Alberic puts them to shame with his mediocrity, and that's why he got the number 1 spot. Anyway, with that being said, that's my list. Let me know if you agree, and if you disagree, what Legendary Lords do you think deserve a spot on the bottom 5 Legendary Lord list? I certainly put in quite a bit of research to find out, and it was very difficult. There was a lot of potential candidates, and even now, I'm still unsure about my top 5 list, because at the end of the day, every Legendary Lord is still better, I think, than every other of its own faction generic Lord. Anyway, that's my top bottom 5 list, I suppose, and we'll see you next time, fuckers.